everybody, and welcome to session 8, Phonics and Fluency. We're going to start with phonics, and we're going to talk a little bit about what the content is of phonics lesson. First off, phonics is a method of teaching people to read by correlating sounds with letters or groups of letters in alphabetic writing system. So I'm going to go into what that means. We're going to break it down. One of the things that you're going to be teaching your kids about is consonants. So they're going to learn that these letters are not vowels, and they're going to learn the different sounds that it makes. Now, they're also going to be learning about vowels. These are A, E, I, O, U, and sometimes Y. And they are also different kinds of sounds. And these sounds may change depending on where they are in a word. So vowels are tricky things. We have long vowels, short vowels, and we have other type of vowel sounds. And so when you think about the long vowels, you're going to think about ones that are influenced by the letter E, like cake, bike, home. We have short vowel sounds like cat, bed, sit, and other vowel sounds like put, soon, dog. So there's a lot of different sounds these vowels can make for children when they start to read. Now, as I said, the vowels can change and letters can change based on where they are and how they pair up in a word. So a phonogram is a letter combination that represents a sound. So for example, CK represents a new sound, which is K as in clock. S can sometimes sound like S or Z, and OI sounds like boy. It has that OI sound. Part of phonics that we talk about sometimes is high frequency words or sight words. So these are words that you see over and over again. And if children have to pause each time to sound them out, things are going to go very slowly. If you look at a lot of text, you're going to have words like to and is and we. They're going to show up over and over again. So in order to start having children be able to be more fluent in their reading, we really want children to learn these words quickly so that each time they see them, they recognize them and they don't have to stop to decode. Another part of phonics is certainly as we start to get into the reading, we start out with a lot of those simple words, but we start to get into words that have multiple syllables. And so, what can help with children reading sometimes is counting out the syllables. Pumpkin, alligator, popcorn, butterfly. So children start to learn that words aren't always short, that they can be elongated, and there's more sounds involved. Another thing that children will encounter during early reading experiences will be compound words. These are two words that are together. What's so nice about this chart is someone has done it in two different colors really to be very helpful. So they know the word butter, they know the word fly, it's a butterfly. Gold, fish, hose, pipe. So they're learning that words can be compounded, that there can be more than one of them in one word alone. Now, how do we assess that children are really learning all these wonderful lessons that we're doing with them? Well, one way is observation, watching them read, listening to them read, seeing what happens when they find a word that they need to decode, that they need to stop and look at. How do they do it? Can they do it? Another way that we can do an assessment on children is through the name test. And this is an example of the name test. And you can see that we go from very simple names like Rob to long words like smush and blade, words that are influenced by other letters, words that have longer vowel sounds, shorter vowel sounds. So in this assessment, the child pretends that they're the teacher and they call out the names, and the teacher is recording the responses, making sure that they are decoding these names properly. Another way that we can assess children and their understanding of phonics is through a running record, which is you have the child read and you are reading along with them and checking off the words where the children have the difficulty and jotting it on the form. Now, we want to talk about how best do you teach phonics? Well, one of the things we know about phonics is that phonics really works well for children pre-K through second grade. After that time, phonics is not the easiest strategy for children to use. So one of the things we know is we really need to work with young children when we're doing phonics instruction. Another thing that we know about phonics instruction is that we want to build on what children already know. We want to scaffold each thing that they know to the next lesson. So children have learned about how print functions. They've learned which way a book opens, which way the sentences go. And so that's the building block for them to learn how to read. We want to make sure that whatever they're doing in terms of reading, so reading instruction with phonics especially, that this is not the only thing that they're doing. We really want them to have a lot of exposure to books. We want to make sure that they're in a print-rich environment. We want to make sure that using phonics is integrated into a reading program. So they're not just learning about decoding, but they're really getting a total reading experience. So sometimes I see teachers spend 45 minutes just working on formal instruction in phonics. It's just not appropriate, especially when you're dealing with young children. You want to give them some tools, and then you want to send them on their way to be able to use them. So let's say they learn today that if there is an A with an E on the end of the word, it changes the letter sound to A. So we want to give them some experiences where they can be successful, where they can really experiment and use what they've just learned. So we really want to make sure it's part of that reading program. We want to make sure that they have a lot of reading and writing opportunities to apply this knowledge. So if you've been studying whatever sounds you're studying, you want that to be incorporated in the lesson so children can feel that ownership and feel that sense of mastery, that they understand that word. And if they don't understand it, that they have the tools to be able to understand it. And really what we want to do is we don't want them to stay decoding. We really want children to be able to recognize words so that they can start to become fluent in reading. So we want them to be able to look at that word that they've just learned and be able to do it without decoding. So if they've just learned the word cape, they're going to see the word cape and they're going to know that's cape. They're not going to have to go back and stop the story each time to decode. So what are the ways to teach phonics? Well, one way is to teach word identification strategies. And so what we do is we want to break the phrase down. So if we're doing an entire sentence, we want to break it down into the words. And what we want to do is we want to break the word then into chunks. And we want to substitute a different vowel for those vowel letters. We want to substitute a different consonant for those letters. We really want them to study that word. So one thing that they could do is they can sound it out. Another thing that they can do is they can look at those word families that we talked about, oi as in boy. They know that makes that sound. Another is to count out the syllables to know that it cannot be the word bed if they can see it already has 2 syllables. And another is to look for root words. So if they know the word train and they know the ending ing, putting it together, training. What does it mean? Well, it doesn't actually mean the train that goes, so we really want them to be able to at least have that strategy, even if it doesn't work in every circumstance. Another thing that we want to do is teach from the whole to part. So, and then back to the whole. So what we want to do is we want to have something like a sentence. Or a nursery rhyme, something that gets children involved in the story. And then we want to be able to pull it out. So if we've been studying the ape sound and we're reading about apes and there's a sentence, good night gorilla, and it has the word ape in it, then we're going to go back, we're going to take that word out and we're going to look at it. We're going to see how it affects the rest of the story. And then we're going to put it back into content. And so we want them to be able to pull those words apart, pull those sentences apart, and pull those letters apart and those sounds apart and really figure out what they're reading. Now, another thing that we can do is we can help them with categorizing words with similar found features. A great way to do this is with words that rhyme. And that could take children a little bit longer. We're looking probably around kindergarten, the end of kindergarten, first grade, to really figure out these rhyming sounds. And it's tricky and it takes some work. But bee, flea, me, we're beginning to see what we need. And then we're going to look at beginning sounds. So the beginning sounds of a consonant and sometimes vowel sounds. Another thing that we want to do is we want to teach children how to decode by analogy. So we want to look at spelling patterns to decode unfamiliar words. So one of the examples that you see here is act, action. What does act mean? Shun is something that we've seen in a lot of different things. So we want to be able to grab the things that we know, pull them apart, compare them to other words that we're familiar with, and come up with what that word could possibly be. You want children to have a big amount of strategies that they can use each time they hit an unfamiliar word. So they're not just worrying about decoding, just sounding it out. We want them to be able to look at ending sounds, beginning sounds, vowel sounds, rhyming sounds, to have strategies in which to figure out words they don't know. Now, another way for children to learn phonics is simply have children to write, and write often, and write with intention that means something to them. So you want to give them lots of opportunities. So one of the ways is in the block corner to go in there and have children make signs that say, stop, don't knock down, or this is my road, or whatever they want to say that's important to them. We want to have pencils out. We want to have pens out, because the more that children work on having other people understand what they're writing, the more they work on all of those things, all those strategies to try to figure out how to write legibly and how to write in ways that other people will understand when they write them. So if we're looking at invented spelling, it's not just all over the place. The more that children write, they're relying on strategies, the same strategies that they use to decode. Now, when we move along, we're going to start to talk about fluency. So this is something that happens after children really start to master reading. So fluency is being able to read with intention, to be able to read without stopping to decode, to read silently or orally with appropriate speed and relative accuracy, with phrasing, intonation, tempo, expression. And the purpose of this is that someone else or themselves can understand the story. So these are some factors that can influence fluency while reading. One is self-confidence. If you don't feel confident while you're reading, you're really going to be hesitant, and you're not going to be certain to grab those words that you might have issue with. So we really want children to be confident when they go start reading. Another thing is desire. Do they really want to read to you? Because if not, and if, do they want to read? If not, that can affect being fluent. Another is their individual style, and this is especially something that you might encounter when you're dealing with children reading out loud. And sometimes you'll hear children's accents. Sometimes it's the way people speak. I'm reminded of Captain Kirk on Star Trek, who speaks in that halting type of voice. That's not affecting fluency. That's just how he talks. Lack of background for the text. If you're reading a sentence and you have no idea what's going on in the story, it can definitely affect how fluent you are in terms of reading. Another is text difficulty. If a text is very difficult to understand and you don't understand the words, you certainly can't be fluent. Another is the environment. If you have children running around being crazy, it's impossible to concentrate. So you really need to have a concentrated environment that's really helps a reader. Another is the audience. If the kids are, messing around and the reader wants to entertain them, that's going to affect fluency. If the children aren't listening, that will affect fluency. Another is limited sight vocabulary. If a child doesn't recognize the words they're reading and they have to stop to decode, that is really going to cause a problem in terms of fluency. And the last is the inability to apply phonics skills and decode unknown words. If they cannot figure out the word, they can't be fluent. So these are some ways that you can help your children become fluent. One way is just encourage them to talk to each other for all different reasons. Having that ability to talk easily with friends and have that self-confidence. Really makes a big difference when it comes to being able to read out loud. Another is providing time for independent silent reading. The more children are engaged with books, the more they read, the more fluent they become, the more they recognize words. We want children to read so much that they look at a word and they know it. Oftentimes you'll hear people say they're not really reading, they just memorize the story. Well, in a sense, or memorize the word. Isn't that what we all do? We see the word enough that we no longer have to decode. And that's what we want children to do. And that only comes from exposure. So some of the ways that we can do this is we use children's literature. By doing shared book experiences where we all go and read a book together, maybe at the same time or maybe at home. Another is echo reading, where I read one sentence, you read it back to me. Another is choral reading, where we all read together. The danger with choral readings, I find though, is that the children who are very confident with what they're reading speak louder, and the children who are not can just mouth the words. So you have to be very careful with choral reading, and you really have to really work on these groupings because you want to know that everyone is sharing in the experience. Read alouds, where a child or the teacher is reading a book. You also want to make sure that these books are interesting, because if not, you're going to lose your audience and they're going to be thinking about other things. You want it to be engaging. With all of this, the literature must be engaging. Another is partner reading. And once again, you really want to make sure that you're thinking about grouping. You want to make sure that they're confident with each other, that, that if you have to stop and make mistakes, that another person can help move them along. So you want to think about what kind of groupings you do in this, but partner reading is very effective. And readers' theater, where there's lots of different ideas with this, but reading dramatically or taking the story and turning it into a drama, which is wonderful. So I hope that gave you some overview on phonics and fluency, and thank you so much.